The City of Annapolis primary election is Tuesday, September 16th. Polls will be open from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m., and if you are in line by 8, you will still be able to vote. There is no Republican primary this year, as all Republican candidates are unopposed and will advance to the November general election. On the Democratic side, there are contested races for mayor and in wards 1, 3, 4, and 6. If you received a mail-in ballot, it must be received, not just postmarked by 4:30 p.m. on September 12th. Ballots can be mailed, dropped in an official drop box, delivered to City Hall, or taken to your polling place on Election Day. Ion Annapolis offered every candidate in the challenge race the opportunity to speak with us. We reached out to each campaign 3 times. Each candidate was asked these same questions, and their answers are presented here, unedited and in their own words. No one received the questions in advance, and in fairness, all of these conversations are being released at the same time. We do plan to do something similar for the general election once the ballot is set. Please have a listen to each of these candidates so you can make an informed vote. All right, well, joining us on the phone today in our continuing series of councilmanic discussions is Craig Cussimanio, who is running as a Democrat for Ward 6 Alderman in the city of Annapolis. We do have elections coming up, if anyone did not know that. And we wanted to touch base with all of the candidates that are in contested races for the primary and learn a little bit more about them and their thoughts and how they would like to represent us here on the city council. How are you? Thank you for taking your time.
I'm doing very well. Thanks, John, for hosting us.
Awesome. Well, let's get right into it. The big elephant in the room, I guess, is the city dock resiliency and flooding project there. We are moving forward with that project to protect downtown from frequent flooding and sea level rise. Do you support that current plan, and how do you ensure its success if you're elected?
I don't support the current plan. I absolutely support the resiliency and the flooding components of the plan. But I would rather focus on the current businesses that are in place and making sure that they're whole, that they're able to operate 365, that they're not worried about continual flooding and lighter foot traffic, frankly. I just feel that at this time, and considering that the budget is kind of in question with it, that it's not prudent to move forward with a big bang like that. I think improving the waterfront, improving the park, amphitheater, green space, moving the parking out to locations that are easy to get to, those are all important and they need to be done. I'm just not in a position to support kind of what's happening right now in a lot of the discussion around spot zoning and a large, dramatic overhaul of the city docks.
That's fair. I want to slide into crime and public safety, which is obviously a concern in every ward across the city. And several neighborhoods are facing pretty significant public safety challenges. I know if we look back to 24, Ward 7 actually was one of the most violent wards in the thing. It had a homicide, 2 rapes, and multiple robberies.
You mean Ward 6?
No, actually, that was Ward 7, to be honest with you,
okay.
in 24.
Okay.
But, and city officials have said there's been common issues like thefts from unlocked vehicles and stuff like that. What do you think we need to do to improve public safety in Annapolis?
Well, so looking at this specifically through the lens of Ward 6, the big shining object, in my opinion, is poverty. Ward 6 is a little bit unique. Of the number of low-income housing, specifically the housing that's operated by HACA, 507 out of 554 units are in Ward 6. That's a huge issue. Public housing median income is roughly $12,000 a year. That's way below 30% AMI if you're looking at extremely low income, the extremely low income deck. So we've got to tackle that problem head on. We've all talked about it. We've been talking about poverty and how poverty is linked to crime and how specifically poverty is linked to violent crime for decades. And yet we're still here. We still have people who barely have enough money to get by day to day, who are under crushing depression in some cases, don't have the mental health services, frankly, don't have the food that they need to get by each day. And yet we're wondering why we are still dealing with extremely high violent crime relative to other communities. We've got to take poverty on head first. And I've got a few proposals that I've talked about to a couple different groups that have invited me to speak, and I'm happy to go into those if you'd like.
Sure.
So one, and this has raised a lot of eyebrows, and I know that it's hard for people to kind of wrap their head around, but if we break down those families, right, those roughly 1,500 families that live in either Section 8 housing or something close to that, where we know they're the crime hotspots. If you look at the Annapolis Police Department's crime map and look at the historical data, if you look at the index crimes as they are reported, I think only up to like 2022 in terms of the UCR and the NIBRS numbers, we know that violent crime is a problem. We know that gun crime specifically is a problem in these neighborhoods. And I know a lot of people talk about people coming in from other neighborhoods and this and that, but the fact of the matter is these people can barely get by. And they're our neighbors. They live in our ward. They live in our city. They're our residents. And we've got to do something to tackle this head on. One of the things I'm proposing as a pilot proposal is targeted guaranteed income for a subset of those that meet that threshold, that way below 30% AMI, that is specifically the public housing medium income. What that essentially would be $500 per month per household. It could be adjusted up or down. The duration would be 12 months. At least on the first for the first year, obviously. The evidence just shows that other pilots that have done this, mayor-led pilots that have done this, have given unconditional cash, improves financial security, it improves mental health, and it improves housing incomes. All of that improves the rates of violent crime in these communities. Is this expensive? Yes. Should it be done? Yes. Are we spending money on other things to target these areas and to lower the crime rate? Yes. So it's just one example of doing something totally different, looking at the problem totally different, but trying to get different outcomes. We've been doing the same thing for way too long with the exact same outcomes. And it's time to actually help the people that are most in need, take care of those communities, and then try to heal Annapolis as a whole.
Housing affordability, you touched on that a little bit with crime and public safety there. Housing costs are, really a growing concern for many Annapolitans. There was a survey recently that it was the number one concern above Marylanders, even above taxes and crime. And 42% of younger renters are considering actually leaving the state. What are your thoughts to make Annapolis more affordable for more people?
Well, I think there's a couple different ways to tackle this question. One is there are a couple proposals that are out there for rezoning, specifically the Tyler Heights overlay program would free up some individual units to allow them to rezone to multiple units on the same property. I support that in spirit, though a lot of that project was specifically designed to help improve Tyler Avenue and the safety concerns around Tyler Avenue. I would rather tackle those problems specifically than try to get the benefits of a rezoning project. So I do think there should be some flexibility in our zoning code. I think it's people's property. They should be able to pretty much do what they want to do with it. Of course, under a lot of conditions that the city would put forward. Second of all, there's the Choice Neighborhood Initiative, or CNI, which is to redevelop Harbor House and then Eastport Terrace, and then eventually Robinwood, all three of which are in Ward 6. I support, again, the spirit of that project. We need mixed-use development. We need to not fence off certain communities and gold plate other communities. We need to mix as much as we possibly can, have as much diversity within a city block as possible. My problem is there's almost no funding for that project. Again, while I support it, it seems to me that we need to get very serious about how we're going to pay for it. We may or may not have a HUD grant to kind of seed that project at $50 million, but I'm not sure why if this is such a big issue, why we're dependent on other funding sources. We need to find the money. We need to develop mixed use property, as we've all talked about, throughout Annapolis. And first and foremost, in Ward 6. There's a lot of land in Ward 6. There's a lot of opportunity. There's a lot of creative ideas that have been floated, and it's time to take those ideas from paper and put them into projects. And I'm not a big fan of big bang projects. It just, things never go the way that they're intended to go. I like to chunk things up into, kind of bite-sized pieces that we can tackle, all leading to the same, to the same place, and with the same outcomes in mind. One huge project in the middle of Annapolis is not going to or is not going to solve the problem, but it certainly gets us towards starting to think differently about how we integrate all housing levels in each, frankly, in each block of the city.
Makes sense. Annapolis' economy relies real heavily on tourism and government. It's contributed to an income inequality and a reputation that it's difficult to do business here. And I know some local businesses have said, I'm never spending another dollar in this town again, out of frustration with the red tape. What are your ideas to make the city more business friendly, but you're still keeping in mind that we have to preserve our charm, character that the tourism is built on?
Well, so I completely understand the frustration. And one of the things that I'm frustrated about are, the projects such as the city dock redevelopment. I'm not sure why we aren't taking care of our existing residents and our existing businesses. The streets are usually pretty gross downtown. The businesses flood regularly. Parking and traffic throughout the city is horrible. So I think we need to fix what we've got, and we need to use the money that we are, hoping to attract other large businesses or hotels with, and put that money kind of where our mouth is, which is, let's take care of who's down there now. A lot of great businesses down there. Those businesses deserve every bit of help that we can give them in terms of becoming a better business. I think a better business then produces other better businesses, which produces more interest in coming down to Annapolis. Annapolis is a fantastic city. It's incredible. It's why we live here. It's why I would not want to live anywhere else. But to look at the next thing without fixing the thing that's in front of us right now, that's so obviously in need, just doesn't make any sense to me. I think we should put that money and that investment in the current infrastructure that we have, make sure the city is lively, walkable, great place for anybody to congregate, great views of the harbor, easy to get in and out via boat, easy to get in and out via car or whatever transportation you've got. And we just really need to look at what we've got and take care of that before we consider spending our money elsewhere.
Well, you talked about getting around in Annapolis, and sort of leads into transportation and traffic congestion, parking shortages, especially during tourist season and certain events, are perennial problems here in Annapolis. Public transit options are limited, and residents often complain about the difficulty getting around. And in a recent debate, mayoral candidates were asked about their ideas to improve public transportation over the next 4 years. What are your thoughts on improving mobility in the city? Parking garages, street parking is a nightmare. How do we solve all that? I guess we don't have 19 hours for that, but
no, that's true. I mean, and there, like I said, there are a lot of great ideas, but we need to take care of our current infrastructure. We need to make sure that the sidewalks, crosswalks, streetscapes are walkable, allow people to shop and get around easily. The parking garage at Hillman, it's fantastic that we've got a big parking garage there. It's completely confusing as to what app you need to park there. And all it takes is one ticket for somebody to decide they don't want to come back to Annapolis. So it just shouldn't be this difficult. It needs to be consolidated. It needs to be, kind of one app that allows us to get where we need to go. That includes public transportation. I think there's absolute need for kind of more micro transportation, either from a garage to downtown or from downtown, over the bridge to Eastport. There's a lot of different ways to tackle this. It's just not going to happen, though, if we continue to run a steady stream of cars right through the middle of downtown. So I'm hoping that some of the redevelopment allows kind of cars to be as close as possible, but without moving, in our most precious areas, which is downtown. I'm not saying get rid of cars, but we need to really think about the easiest way for people to enjoy spending their money in Annapolis and just having a good time, like is done in other jurisdictions.
Let's talk about the youth in education. And I know the city government doesn't control the schools, which are run by the county to a degree. But our leaders still have an impact on education and youth in Annapolis. How would you support educational opportunities and youth programs within the city?
That's kind of a loaded question. I absolutely support it. I think there's a lot of programs that are out there, a lot of which are either underfunded or frankly underutilized. I'll give you one example of a different way of thinking about this. There's a group who just built a community garden in Harbor House. His name is Matt Wallace. Joy Grows is the name of his 501c3. When we were there, and when we were in the garden occasionally, tending to the garden, no shortage of kids come out every single time, probably 6 to 10 to upwards of 20 at a time. They're eager. They want to work. They want to work in the garden. They want to know what's going on. They want to have fun. Oftentimes they're asking, can we get, would you take us on a field trip? Would you take us here? Would you take us there? So we've got to meet the kids where they're at. And that means making it easy to go to after school programs. It means making after school both a safe place as well as an enriching place. And that means also thinking about things like public gardens and thinking about taking kids on field trips in summer when there's not a lot to do. I know a lot of people do this, but unfortunately, a lot of these families just simply don't have the money to do that. And I'm talking about, $20 to do this or that. Making it free is fine, and I'm all about that. But we also need to put some money in the pockets of some of these families that are at the public housing median income. I mean, it's another example of this is if you're making $12,000 a year, the chances of you, if your son or daughter coming to you and saying like, "Hey, look, I heard that there's this thing called ChatGPT, and I'd like to use it in school. It can be a very useful tool." Well, you can use the free one for sure, but most of the people in your class are going to be, their parents are happy to pay $20 a month for a lot more robust tool set. So now you have kids who are already starting at a disadvantage, who already are at a disadvantage, frankly, who now are at an even more disadvantage because they don't have the $20 a month to spend on the tools that a lot of the other families do. So there's, again, I want to keep hitting on this point, but there's not that many families. We're talking 1,500 families that are in extreme poverty, and a little bit goes a long way. So we've got to give them the opportunity to be as good of students as all the other kids are that they're going to be going to, grade school, middle school, and high school with.
Switching into transparency and ethics, city residents do expect open and ethical government, and as stated in the ethics guidelines, holding the public trust requires maintaining high ethical standards. How are you going to promote transparency and accountability at City Hall as an alderman for Ward 6?
It's all I know. I don't know. It's as simple as walking around, as I've been doing, day in, day out, talking to people in Ward 6. If they ask me a question and I have an answer, I give it to them. If I'm wrong, then I'll go back and tell them I'm wrong and remedy that. If I don't have an answer, I won't give them an answer. If I hear something's coming up and something we need to consider getting a group of people together to talk about, then we just simply need to do that. One example of this is, and I don't mean to pick on city government as it is right now, but there's this kind of tradition that anybody who puts forward legislation, everybody adopts it unanimously on a first reader. Well, I think that courtesy is simply bad government. It causes a lot of swirl. It causes a lot of people to hear things, to talk about things, to hide things that may or may not be true simply because somebody said, hey, I've got an idea. Well, if you have an idea, present it to the city council. And this is what we're being paid to do, is to decide if that sounds like a good idea or not. Simply a courtesy of a first reader kicks off a lot of extra work for the city, a lot of extra work for the men and women who have to do, the research and the development of these proposals. So we just need to be adults. We need to say, look, if you have an idea, present it to the council first. We'll decide if it goes any further than that. And that's that. This is what we're here to do. We're not here to hear every single policy that anybody could dream up and take it seriously as a vote, a unanimous vote as a first reader. That's not what mature governments, it's not what adult governments do. So I think we need to move away from the courtesy of a first reader.
I'll tell you, you mentioned the past administration and that first reader thing there. The current mayor and council, or half the council, is leaving office come December. And there's been a lot of discussion about their legacy. Some praise Mayor Buckley. One candidate for mayor even said he's been one of the best mayors we've ever had. But there's been a lot of criticism. City dock projects ballooned from $40 million to $50 million to now it's $100 million, and making the city heavily reliant on that $33 million FEMA grant to come in here. In your view, what is the outgoing administration done right, and where did it fall short?
I have no idea. In Ward 6, we're dealing with issues that are very straightforward. We've got rivers that run through backyards when it rains. We need to improve public safety. We need to have housing that is affordable. And we need real solutions to the deep poverty problems that we're seeing. There is no great mayor unless all these problems are solved. That's how I judge it. I'm not saying that Gavin was a bad mayor or a good mayor. I simply don't know. And I don't know what good it does to look at that. I know he had a lot of energy. He was a visionary. He led the city through some really difficult times, and he unified the city, frankly. If you look at just the voting numbers alone, I mean, he's got a real passion and real vision. It's time to deliver. And that's not about him. He's taken a lot of proposals forward. It's time for us to deliver on his proposals. And we are facing serious headwinds. Money's not as cheap as it once was for bonds. We've got a lot of grants and other monies that are hanging in the balance. So I judge the city council and a mayor and the effectiveness of such based on how are we solving these problems that we keep talking about year in and year out. And if that means we're solving it a little bit, that's great. That means then you're doing a great job. If it means you solve these problems, then that means you probably should be running for president. We talk about these problems all the time. Every single person I know wants affordable housing or housing you can afford. Every person I know wants crime to go down. Every person I know wants the poverty issue solved. Yet I'm not seeing the work and the money being ported into those specific problems. I may be missing it, and maybe some of this is not as much of an issue for some other aldermen as it is. But coming from Ward 6, these are my priorities, and this is how I'll judge myself as whether or not I'm an effective leader or not.
Well, you talked about the different grants and everything else, and we are looking at, we've got to make do with some limited resources. We've got a good number of our tax base is tax exempt between government entities as well as churches and nonprofits. We're possibly looking at some gaps in federal funding and some reduction in federal funding there. Where do your budget priorities lie when budget season rolls around for the city?
So, first of all, the actual, I'll call it discretionary for lack of a better term. Part of the budget's about a third, but again, a lot of that's already locked into agreements or longer term contracts that we're involved with. 2/3 of the budget goes to personnel. It goes to our fire, our police, our city managers, those types of people. It also goes to the mayor and it goes to the council member. And then now it's going to go to the council members as twice as much as what it once was. My priorities are this. We need to fix these bread and butter issues. We need to make sure our sidewalks are safe. We need to make sure people have the food that they need to get through the day. We need to make sure that as we are moving forward with larger scale development, that it has to include housing that's affordable for everybody that we want to live in the city. And last time I looked, I want everybody who lives in the city to live in the city. So those are my priorities. I'm going to be a real hawk when it comes to doing something that kind of falls outside of that very specific scope. That, in my opinion, is where we need to focus all of our effort. We've got a lot of good research. We've done a lot of really good analysis behind a lot of these problems. I mean, the city, in some cases, the council has turned into this incredible think tank. But it's time to take those data and those projects and put them to work. I'm a project manager at heart. That's what I did as a technology executive for most of my career. I've run projects that were upwards of $500 million at a Fortune 200 company. No project is ever going to go as planned. And the bigger the scope, the larger the project, the more likely that things will go sideways. We need to look very specifically at what we want to do for the first 90 days, first half of the year, really have everybody understand and align on what those needs are. A lot of people are talking about a lot of problems. We need to understand what are the most significant problems, what are the most impactful projects that we have on deck to handle these projects, and let's fund those first. Anything else is gravy as far as I'm concerned. Once we make sure that we're looking to make this community as healthy and as happy as possible.
Voters often feel disconnected from City Hall, their officials. How do you plan to engage the public and stay connected with your Ward 6 residents and stay accountable to them between elections?
Well, first of all, every single contact I've made with anybody in Ward 6 over the last few weeks, I've given them my personal mobile number. I don't do that to send a signal. I do it because I want to hear from people. It's the word on the street. It's what Nancy's saying over in Truxton Heights. It's what Joe's saying over on Tyler Avenue. Those are the things that people are tops of their minds, and oftentimes they may not be quite right about what they're hearing or what they're seeing. So you've got to meet people where they are. That means we need monthly check-ins, neighborhood to neighborhood. I'm here, it could be as easy as meeting with a couple people to 20 people. We from Truxton Heights to Primrose, Tyler Avenue, Harbor House, East Fort Terrace, Robinwood. We need to be there, and we need to have people listening to what we're saying, listening to what we're hearing, and then obviously listen to what their needs are, what their questions are. You bring up a really good point when you ask how many rapes are there. Nobody knows. I would venture to guess that your number is probably not accurate, and not your fault, but that number could change tomorrow depending upon how those crimes are classified or reclassified. That's the kind of stuff that people are talking about. And we need to be prepared to say, like, okay, I understand what you're saying. I understand this is a concern, but let's take this from this conversation into the next phase, which is, okay, what are we going to do about it? The other thing that we need to do is to stop this courtesy of the first reader. It causes so much swirl, and it's what everybody talks about for no good reason. So rather than do that, I want to make sure that we're able to drive discussion either, monthly and quarterly about the legislation as soon as it gets to the first reader, if it makes it through first reader. That way we're getting this information and these ideas in front of people to let them think about it for a second. It's, the worst thing that can happen is you ask somebody what they think about a particular issue or a project one time, and they can only say one thing, which is what I know right now is this is how I feel, and this is what I this is my perspective. But we also know, you and I both know, that we need to think about things for a little bit, and that means I need as much information as I can get. I need to understand how you feel, how I feel, why you feel. And we just need to go about this as we would, when we're leading a company or a family. Open and honest conversations, the hard conversations, the conversations that may lead to, I understand what you're saying, but we're not going to be able to do that right now because we're doing this. And this is what we feel is more important. They may never come around to understanding that, but at least they understand why you're doing something as opposed to just hearing that you've done something. So you've just got to be available. I'm a stay-at-home dad. I've got the time. I just dropped my youngest daughter off at college. So we truly are empty houses. I mean, I get bored, frankly. And so, talking to people, thinking about things, dreaming up projects, it's what I like doing. It occupies my time. If I can't do that, I'm probably going to have to get a job. And I'd rather have this job than another job, I think. But
Craig, if you need a hobby in your retirement, I think knitting might be a little bit less stressful.
Oh my God, knit! I would not be good at knitting. I'll tell you that.
Let's look over to some ward specific questions. I mean, every ward has their own issues, their own concerns and their needs. In Ward 6, what do you see as the single most pressing issue facing your community, and how are we going to address that?
So I'll give the big answer first, which is poverty. As I said, Ward 6 has 507 out of the 554 traditional Section 8 housing units in the city. We're blessed with that because you know what? These are people who know what day-to-day living looks like, and they know how a little bit goes a long way. What I'm asking is that we help give these people a leg up as best we can to help get them through that day, to start thinking about tomorrow, start thinking about next week, next month, next year. Until we do, we'll be talking about these same conversations. We'll be talking about how crime is high in a lot of these communities specifically. We'll be talking about how it's violent crime and how it could have been avoided, had this person had this opportunity or this off-ramp, so on and so forth. I don't want to have those conversations every year. I want to have the conversations that say that, like, look, this happens to be working, or this family, who was in public housing has moved on because we were able to provide them, just a little bit to get them a leg up. That's how I look at it. And that's how I look at Ward 6 specifically. More specifically, it's, it definitely is a safety issue, whether we're talking about street crossings in Tyler Avenue or getting, over across Forest Drive to Robinwood and back. We need to make our streets safer. That means taking care of the violent crime issue for sure, but also really thinking about how people move in and out of the ward. We're the only ward that's frankly surrounded on all sides by either another ward or a little tiny sliver of the county. So people are moving in and out of Ward 6 all the time. And a lot of times people are moving through Ward 6. So we really need to be mindful about that. We need more opportunities for food and groceries. We need to make sure people don't have to shop at Walgreens for their daily or weekly needs. We need to think about bodega style offerings that could even be subsidized. There's an old there's an opportunity, across the street from us that I'm looking into. When it comes to the old seafood market, there's an opportunity to provide in a really interesting location to provide those types of businesses that really are very accessible to the folks in Ward 6. And maybe that also provides an opportunity for some mixed use housing as well. We should be looking at that. But right now, Ward 6 has almost no business other than the small business community over where Jared's hardware store is. Almost all residential, almost all, medium to low income residences. So my focus is very laser specific on what needs to be done. We need to provide help and services to the people that are most in need. And unfortunately, most of them live in Ward 6.
Well, how would you balance your ward interest versus citywide interest? Because, I mean, you're an alderman specifically for Ward 6, but you're also representing the city. And obviously, Ward 1, Ward 2, Ward 3, Ward 5, Ward 7, and Ward 8 all have their own things there. How do you balance that?
Well, first, let me say this. Some of the wards have had way more their share of the focus for a lot of good reasons and a lot of not so great reasons. If you look at the city as a whole, which we have to look at the city as a whole, if you think of it as a body, if it's our body and our foot hurts, we fix it. If our hand hurts, we fix it. If we have a heart disease, we try to fix it. But unless the body as a whole feels good and is operating as best it can, then we shouldn't be resting. I shouldn't be. Let me pick a Ward 8 right next door. Right, if Ward 8 is doing amazing, if Ward 8 has everything that they need, then we need to be concerned. We need to be concerned that somehow part of the city is getting everything they want and need, and other parts of the city aren't. We have to look at the city holistically. One of the things that I think really distinguishes me from my opposition is that I'm a very strong leader. I'm a very consensus-driven thinker. It takes 5 votes to get anything done at the city level. We have to always be thinking about, how does this benefit everybody? How does a project in Ward 2 potentially benefit the people of Ward 6? And it would be my job to consistently and constantly drive that message. If I am in support of another alderman or alderwoman's proposal, I should be able to come back to my constituents and say, look, yes, this is happening there, but here is the real tangible benefit for Ward 6 and the other wards as well. You can't, you have to look at the body holistically, and you also have to have the strength and stamina to continually communicate why you are supporting something or why you aren't supporting something, so that your constituents have as much information as they need to understand where you're coming from, as well as other aldermanic candidate or aldermanic people, I guess, understand where you're coming from as well, and why you're not supporting something if you don't feel that it doesn't support the people of your ward.
It's good. Well, I'll tell you, as we wrap it up, we've got about 14,000 subscribers to the podcast, and whoever listens to it on Annapolis or on the social medias and stuff like that, I want to give you your chance for the floor or the microphone. What do we need to know about Craig Cussimanio? Give us your pitch. Why do we need to vote for you?
I think it's pretty straightforward. I've already kind of laid out the issues that are important to the very hardworking residents of Ward 6. And these problems cannot be solved with the same old approaches. That's clear. History has taught us that. We can't keep doing things the same way and expect different results. It's time to be bold and creative, put together policy and positions that specifically target what we've been talking about today. I'm talking about structural change that addresses the root causes for these challenges. And it has to lift up all of the residents in Ward 6, not just the blessed few or those who have more money than others. And it has to lift up the city. I'm committed to this fight, and we need real tangible solutions. We need to, frankly, stop studying all of these issues to death and start putting shovels in the ground. It's time to put our money where our mouth is. We don't need another study to tell us why violent crime is up in certain communities. We don't need another study to tell us why housing is unattainable or unaffordable for a lot of people. We know these problems exist. We know that we need to do something about them. And frankly, we're all Democrats for the most part. We should be aligned on a lot of this. We should be really focused on how we are going to help people and how we get people to where they want to go. And if we can't do that, then I'm not so sure that the city is going to be successful. I think we might be here in another 4 years, having these same conversations, talking about all the same solutions, but nothing's been done. I wouldn't be able to live with myself if that were the case. I wouldn't want to be in office if that were the case. So it's time to get to work. The really, really hard work focused on the core problems that we are experiencing in this city. If you take what probably every single one of your candidates has talked about in terms of their focus, what they're hearing from their residents, what they'd like to get done, I bet we could distill all of that down into about half a piece of paper. That's all it's going to take then to say, like, okay, if this is the case, if this is what we all want to do, how are we going to do it? Show me a proposal. Show me what you want to do. Show me where you would spend the money. Don't tell me that you're going to do something, but you're not going to give me any detail behind it, or it's not going to have the funding required, and it's not going to be durable. Show me how you're going to do it. I'm putting policy out. I'm putting positions out. I'm doing it because I want people to say, no, that doesn't work. We've tried that. Or no, that's a terrible idea, and here's why. Show me that. And in the meantime, you better show me what you're going to do about it, because talk is cheap. It's time to actually get these problems solved. It's doable. There's enough money to go around. There's enough help out there. There's enough people who are willing to pony up, both private and citywide. So I'm just at that point where I don't want to be frustrated anymore. We've come off COVID. We've had a rough time. People are still hurting out there, and it's time that we really help out and we really put our money where our mouth is.